The flashing red and blue lights cut through the humid Alabama night like the judgment of a system that never sleeps. Bouncing off the black sedan's polished hood as it rolled to a stop beside the cracked shoulder of Route 28. The only sound, the low hum of cicadas and the faint thump of a heart that had grown too used to moments like this. Marcus Tate sat still behind the wheel, his hand frozen inches from the glove compartment where his badge rested, the badge that could end this in 1 second flat, or make it worse. He'd been down this road before, just not like this, not tonight, not after what had just happened at the courthouse. The dashboard clock blinked 11:48 p.m., another late drive home after a case closed. He wasn't supposed to be here, neither literally nor metaphorically. He had spent his entire life avoiding scenes like this, training for years to rise above them, to enforce the law without becoming another statistic on a shaky cell phone recording. But here he was, headlights glaring, shadows moving behind the patrol car's windshield, two silhouettes growing larger, heavier, and angrier with every step they took toward him. The beam of a flashlight hit his face before he could blink, the officer's tone snapping through the silence. License and registration. The words came flat, sharp, the voice belonging to a man who had already decided what kind of person Marcus was before he even reached the window. Marcus's jaw tightened. He kept his tone calm. "Evening, officer. Is there a reason for the stop?" The man's partner circled the car like a vulture. "You swerved," came the lie, quick and rehearsed. "We'll see if you've been drinking." Marcus's pulse ticked faster. He'd seen enough traffic stop footage in his line of work to know how the script could go. He lifted his hands slowly, visible, steady as stone. "My wallet's in my back pocket," he said. The first cop smirked, tilting his head as if amused. "Go ahead." Real slow. The second one's hand hovered above his holster. There was something in their eyes. Not curiosity, not duty, but that hungry mix of control and disdain Marcus had witnessed in suspects, not cops. He moved with deliberate care, handed over his ID, and watched the flashlight sweep over his face again. "Marcus Tate," the officer read aloud, voice dripping suspicion. "What brings you out here this late, Mr. Tate?" Marcus exhaled, long and controlled. "Just heading home from work." The cop leaned closer. "What kind of work keeps a man like you out at midnight in a suit?" The partner chuckled from behind. "Maybe he's one of those crypto guys. Fancy car, no job." Marcus said nothing. The less he gave them, the better. He'd learned that silence, though it burned, was often safer than truth. But when the officer took one more step toward the open window, spitting tobacco on the gravel, Marcus knew it wouldn't matter. "Step out of the car," the man ordered. Marcus blinked once, twice. "For what reason?" "Because I said so," the cop snapped. "Or do you want me to explain it to a judge after we're done?" The words landed like a hammer. Marcus opened the door slowly, stepping into the thick, muggy air. He stood tall, 6'2", clean-cut, composed. His badge was still inside, tucked in the glove compartment. He debated showing it now, but something stopped him. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe pride. Maybe the quiet rage that had been building for years under layers of discipline. The officer shoved him lightly. "Hands on the hood!" Marcus's voice dropped an octave, controlled steel. "Officer, you have no probable cause." "I said hands on the hood!" The second officer's flashlight jabbed his ribs. The heat from the engine burned through his palms as his breath came sharp and steady. "What's in the trunk?" "Work equipment," Marcus said evenly. "Open it." "Without a warrant?" The first officer laughed. "You think you're on TV, boy? Open the damn trunk before I call a K-9. Marcus turned, eyes steady, and saw the smirk falter for a half-second. Something about his calm unnerved them. He clicked the trunk open with the remote. The officer rummaged through a locked case in the back seat, tugging at the latch. "What's this?" he asked. Marcus said nothing. The partner opened it, revealing a folder stamped U.S. Marshal Service across the front in bold federal font. The air shifted. Both men froze for a moment, eyes darting to each other, then back at him. "What the hell is this?" the first officer muttered. Marcus finally spoke, voice low and lethal. "That's my identification folder. I'm Deputy U.S. Marshal Marcus Tate. You just assaulted a federal officer." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. The partner took a step back. The first one didn't move, jaw twitching, pride and panic warring behind his eyes. You got proof of that. Marcus opened his wallet slowly and flipped it, the gold badge glinting under the streetlight. The cop's expression changed, not to apology, but calculation. "You could have said that earlier," he muttered. "I shouldn't have to," Marcus replied, every syllable deliberate. The man's voice hardened again, an attempt to regain control. "You were acting suspicious, that's all. You people—" He caught himself too late. Marcus's eyes flashed. "You people what?" he said quietly. The cop straightened. "Don't play the race card, Marshal. We're just doing our job." "Your job," Marcus said slowly, "is to enforce the law, not invent it." He turned toward his car, but the officer blocked him. "Where do you think you're going?" "Home." The man stepped closer, smirking again. "Not yet you're not. I'm calling this in." "You could be lying." His partner, uneasy, muttered, "Tom, maybe—" "Shut up," Tom barked, pulling out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Need verification on a supposed federal badge." Marcus had heard enough. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of serving arrest warrants in cities far more dangerous than this sleepy stretch of highway. "Call your captain, now!" The words weren't shouted, but they hit like a command. The officer hesitated, then complied, muttering into the radio. Marcus stood still, staring past the patrol lights into the darkness, where freedom lay just beyond their arrogance. He thought of his father, a man stopped by cops like these in another decade, who hadn't survived the misunderstanding. The ache in Marcus's chest was old, heavy, and suddenly alive again. 10 minutes later, another car arrived, a black SUV bearing county insignia. A tall woman stepped out, crisp uniform, eyes alert. Captain Sarah Nolan. She approached the scene with a frown. "What's going on here?" Officer Tom started rambling immediately. "This man claims he's a marshal, wouldn't comply." She cut him off with one raised hand. "Did you verify his ID?" "I was about to." "You were about to?" She turned toward Marcus, who simply handed her his badge and credentials. Her eyes flicked to the seal, then to his name. Her posture shifted instantly. "Deputy Tate," she said, voice formal. "I'm sorry for this inconvenience." Marcus nodded once, but his eyes stayed locked on the two men who had humiliated him. "Your officers need retraining," he said quietly. "And accountability." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Agreed." She turned on the officers, voice rising. "You two are done for the night. Go back to the station and wait for me." Tom's face reddened. "Ma'am, now!" she barked. The night swallowed their retreating footsteps. When they were gone, she turned back to Marcus. "I wish I could say this doesn't happen often," she said softly. "But we both know it does." Marcus didn't answer. He looked at the stars instead, faint behind the haze. "Every time it does," he murmured, "it chips away at the uniform I wear." She nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," he said, meeting her gaze. "You don't. You can't. But you can help me fix it." Her expression changed. Curiosity piqued. "How?" Marcus closed the trunk, the U.S. Marshal Service folder still visible. "By letting me do my job. Starting tomorrow, your precinct's about to be under federal review. I was here tonight to investigate an internal misconduct claim filed against your department." The captain blinked. "You were?" "I was," Marcus confirmed. "And congratulations, Captain. You just gave me probable cause to dig deeper." The words hung in the air as he got back into his car. The captain stood there, watching his taillights disappear into the distance, her mind spinning. She knew this wasn't over. For Marcus, neither was the night. As he drove away, his phone buzzed on the seat beside him. An anonymous message appeared. "Now you see what we're up against." "Be careful, Marshal. They're not all done with you yet." He stared at the screen, the road stretching endlessly ahead, and realized this wasn't a coincidence. The stop hadn't been random. Someone wanted to send him a message. Someone inside that department. Someone who thought pulling him over would scare him off the case. But they had no idea who Marcus Tate really was, or how far he was willing to go to expose them all. Marcus didn't sleep that night. The glow from the dashboard had burned itself into his mind like an afterimage. the red and blue reflections looping every time he closed his eyes, flashing across the faces of men who thought they were untouchable. By sunrise, the storm inside him had cooled into precision. He brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, opened the case file that had started this whole assignment, and stared at the cover sheet. Federal Investigation 1178B, Alleged Misconduct, Clark County Sheriff's Department. The anonymous tip had claimed falsified arrest reports, excessive force, and suspiciously missing dashcam footage linked to officer-involved incidents targeting Black and Latino motorists, the same department that had stopped him the night before. Coincidence didn't exist in Marcus Tate's world. Patterns did. He called his supervisor at the U.S. Marshal Service before dawn. "I got confirmation," Marcus said. "They're dirtier than we thought." The voice on the other end was calm, gravelly. "Then dig. But keep it clean, Tate. No headlines yet." Marcus ended the call and drove to the regional office, the early morning haze rising over the fields like ghosts of a town too proud to admit its rot. The agents on shift greeted him with quiet nods. Most of them knew his reputation. Marcus didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He had a folder in one hand, a silent fury in the other. By 8 a.m., he was in the evidence room cross-referencing names, badge numbers, and incident codes. A pattern emerged fast. 6 officers, including Tom Ferris, the one who'd called him Boy. Their body cam uploads often failed mid-stop. Their reports used the same phrasing, "suspect resisted," even when witnesses said otherwise. One case, however, stood out. DeAndre Lewis, 27, deceased during routine stop, ruled accidental. Marcus remembered the name. It had surfaced in the complaint that triggered the federal review. The coroner's report said heart failure, but the photographs told a different story. Bruises along the ribs, fingerprints at the base of the neck. Marcus clenched his jaw. It was the same stretch of highway where they'd pulled him over. He printed the file and drove straight to the Clark County precinct unannounced. When he stepped through the glass doors in his pressed gray suit, every conversation in the lobby stopped. The front desk officer stiffened as Marcus flashed his badge. "Deputy U.S. Marshal Tate here on federal business," he said, his voice slicing through the awkward silence. "Where's Captain Nolan?" 10 seconds later, Nolan appeared, surprise flickering before she composed herself. "Marshal Tate," she said carefully. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." "Corruption rarely sends invitations," he replied. "We need a private room." Inside the conference room, Marcus laid out the files. "I'm here officially now. Last night's stop confirmed what this paperwork suggested: racial profiling, falsified evidence, and possible homicide cover-ups. I'll need full access to personnel files and internal affairs reports for these 6 officers." Nolan hesitated. "That could take days." "The sheriff's not my concern," Marcus cut in. "Federal Statute 42-1983 supersedes local jurisdiction. You cooperate or I file obstruction charges before lunch." She blinked, then nodded. "You'll have what you need." Marcus studied her face. She looked tired, maybe even ashamed. "Captain," he said more softly, "you didn't order what happened last night, but you allowed a culture where it could. I suggest you start deciding which side of this you're on." When he left the precinct, whispers followed him like shadows. That night, he met his contact at a diner outside town, an ex-cop named Javier Cruz who'd left the force after exposing graft in another county. Javier slid a flash drive across the table. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered. "But those boys aren't just racists. They're running something deeper. Kickbacks from towing contracts, fake overtime sheets, maybe even evidence tampering. The sheriff's in it, too." Marcus's stomach turned. How deep? Deep enough that internal affairs won't touch it. "They already buried 3 complaints." Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then we dig where they can't." He spent the next 48 hours buried in records, building a wall of names, dates, and transfers across his motel room wall. Each string of red twine connected another dirty file. He noticed a recurring signature, T. Ferris, evidence chain custodian, on several sealed packages related to the Lewis case. When Marcus requested those evidence boxes through official channels, the clerk reported they'd been lost in transit. That was the last confirmation he needed. Someone inside the department was actively destroying proof. On the third night, as he stepped out to his car, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine idling. Its tinted window rolled down just enough for a cigarette ember to glow. Marcus stared back until the SUV pulled away. They were watching him now. He dialed Nolan immediately. "Captain," he said, "your department's compromised. Someone's feeding information to the targets." She exhaled shakily. "I was afraid of that. I'll set a trap. Give me a name." "Ferris," Marcus said. "He's your leak." The line went silent, then, "Understood." The next morning, Ferris called in sick. By noon, Marcus's motel room had been broken into. Nothing stolen, just his files rearranged. An intimidation tactic. He smiled grimly. They wanted him rattled. Instead, they'd just confirmed his case. He contacted the DOJ liaison and requested an emergency federal audit of the Clark County Sheriff's Department. Within 24 hours, word spread through the town like wildfire. Local news vans appeared outside the courthouse. Citizens whispered that something big was coming. But the old guard inside the department wasn't about to go quietly. That evening, Marcus received another anonymous text. "Stop digging, Marshal." Last warning. He ignored it, went out for coffee, and returned to find his car tires slashed. He reported it to local police, who arrived an hour later, two young deputies clearly uncomfortable with the badge he wore. "Rough neighborhood," one muttered. Marcus didn't bother replying. He'd been in war zones where men with rocket launchers were less dangerous than scared cops with badges. He moved to a safer location, a safe house owned by the Marshals. There, he prepared the official briefing for Washington. But as he typed, his mind kept circling back to one thing, the look in Captain Nolan's eyes when he mentioned the cover-ups. She'd looked more than scared. She'd looked trapped. The following morning, he found out why. A courier delivered an envelope to his safe house door. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, Nolan's, showing deposits from a construction company connected to the sheriff's campaign fund. Payoffs disguised as consulting fees. Marcus felt the betrayal like a punch. He called her office, but she didn't answer. He left one message. "If you're in trouble, tell me before it's too late." Hours later, she did. She showed up at the safe house, pale, shaking. "They know everything," she said. "Ferris told the sheriff you're building a federal case. They're going to erase the files tonight." "Where?" Marcus asked. "Evidence warehouse off Highway 19 midnight." He grabbed his gun, his badge, and the flash drive. "Stay here," he ordered. "If they find you with me, you're finished." But Nolan shook her head. "I'm done hiding." Together they drove into the darkness, headlights slicing through fog. The warehouse loomed ahead, metal walls, one flickering light, two patrol cars out front. Marcus parked behind a line of trees. "We go in quiet," he whispered. "You keep your hands visible, no sudden moves. If anything goes wrong, call the DOJ hotline." She nodded, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. They slipped through a side door, the sound of shredders humming inside. Two men in uniform were feeding stacks of documents into an industrial machine. Marcus stepped out, gun drawn. "Federal agents, step away from the shredder!" The men froze, then bolted in opposite directions. Nolan tackled one. Marcus chased the other through the aisles of evidence shelves. Boxes toppled, papers flew. The man drew his weapon and fired, one shot grazing Marcus's shoulder. Marcus fired back, disarming him with a single precise round to the hand. The officer screamed, dropping the gun. "Where's Ferris?" Marcus demanded. "He's cleaning house," the man gasped. "Back room!" Marcus stormed through, blood seeping through his sleeve, pain dulled by adrenaline. In the back room, Ferris was pouring gasoline over boxes labeled Lewis case. "Don't do it," Marcus warned. Ferris turned, smirking. "You think you can take down all of us, Marshal? This town loves me." "They won't love what's on those tapes," Marcus said. "The dash cam from the Lewis stop, where is it?" Ferris's grin faltered. "You'll never see it." He flicked a lighter. Marcus fired. The bullet hit the lighter midair, sending it clattering harmlessly aside. In two strides, Marcus had him pinned against the wall, cuffs clicking shut. Nolan burst in behind him, breathing hard. "Backup's coming," she said. "You okay?" Marcus nodded, wiping blood from his arm. "Get that hard drive," he ordered, pointing to a laptop on the desk. "That's our proof." Moments later, sirens wailed outside, state troopers and marshals converging on the site. Ferris cursed as he was dragged away, shouting threats. "You think this ends with me?" "You're a dead man, Tate!" Marcus ignored him. He looked at Nolan. "We have what we need. Tomorrow this department falls." She exhaled, trembling. "And the sheriff?" Marcus's eyes hardened. "He's next." As dawn broke, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. The story exploded nationally. Federal Marshal uncovers systemic racism and corruption in Clark County Sheriff's Office. Ferris and 4 others were indicted. The sheriff resigned under pressure. Nolan, though complicit by silence, cooperated fully and was granted immunity. But for Marcus, victory tasted hollow. He'd won a battle, not the war. That evening, as he packed his case files, another message flashed on his phone. "Nice work, Marshal. You cleaned one nest. But the real problem's higher up. You ready for the next level? No sender, no trace." Marcus stared at the screen, the faint echo of that first traffic stop replaying in his mind, the arrogance, the danger, the system that had created men like Ferris. He slipped his badge back into his coat, eyes cold and determined. "Always," he murmured. And as thunder rolled in the distance, he knew the next fight wouldn't just be about one department. It would be about the whole rotten tree that still thought it could hide its roots in the dark. The storm that rolled over Alabama that night felt like a cleansing. Thunder cracking open the sky as if the heavens themselves were tired of silence. But Marcus Tate knew better. Storms didn't wash away corruption. They just made it easier to see the mud when daylight came. He watched the rain pour against the safe house windows while the national news played on mute, his own face flashing briefly on the ticker. U.S. Marshal exposes racist police network in Clark County. He didn't care for the headlines, but the calls coming in proved the rot ran far deeper than anyone dared admit. 3 voicemails already from federal offices he didn't trust, and one from an unknown number that simply said, "They're coming for you next." By dawn, he was on a plane to Washington, D.C., summoned to brief a joint Justice Department task force. The Capitol looked gray and cold when he landed, the marble buildings gleaming like monuments to ideals men had long since traded for politics. Inside the Hoover Building, he sat before a panel of officials who smiled too much and listened too little. "Deputy Tate," one said smoothly, "impressive work. But local corruption is a state matter. You may have overstepped jurisdiction." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "Overstepped? I enforced federal civil rights law. Unless that changed overnight, gentlemen, my jurisdiction begins where justice fails." The room went silent. Another man cleared his throat. "We're not questioning your dedication, Marshal. We're just saying this case drew unwanted attention. The media's running with a racial narrative we didn't authorize." Marcus's jaw flexed. Maybe because the narrative's true. The chairwoman, older, pragmatic, interjected. "Enough. Deputy Tate, your findings will be referred to the Office of Inspector General. In the meantime, stand down from field operations." That last phrase hit harder than expected. They were benching him. He'd seen it happen before. When the truth got too big, bureaucracy smothered it under paperwork. He stood, slipped his badge onto the table, and said quietly, "If you think this ends with my silence, you don't know me." Then he walked out. Outside, the rain had turned to mist. He dialed Javier Cruz. "They're burying it," he said flatly. "The DOJ wants the story dead." Javier sighed on the other end. "Told you, hermano, the infection's not just local, it's federal." "Then we expose them all." Javier hesitated. "Careful. These people don't send warnings twice." But Marcus was already in motion. He rented a small apartment under an alias in D.C., built a digital wall of evidence across 3 encrypted drives, and started connecting dots between the sheriff's donors, state contracts, and federal grants. The money trail led upward to a senator named Walter Griggs, who'd built his career preaching law and order while funneling funds to rural departments notorious for civil rights violations. Marcus found correspondence between Griggs's office and Clark County officials, referencing pilot programs that disguised political kickbacks as policing grants. He had the proof, but not the leverage. For that, he needed a public witness. He called Captain Nolan. She sounded wary, exhausted. "They froze my pension," she said. "I'm radioactive now. You still want redemption?" Marcus asked. Silence. Then, "What do you need?" "A testimony," he said. "On record. I'll protect you," she agreed. They met in a parking garage beneath an abandoned mall, neutral ground. Nolan handed him a flash drive containing years of internal memos, including one signed by Senator Griggs's aide authorizing equipment transfers that never existed. "This'll end careers," she whispered. "It'll end lives if we don't move fast," Marcus replied. As they left, he noticed a black SUV at the far exit, the same model that had watched him weeks ago. Its lights flicked on, then off. They were being followed again. Marcus grabbed Nolan's arm. "Go, different routes. If they tail you, head to the FBI safe zone downtown." She nodded, fear tight in her throat. Marcus drove fast through the rain-slick streets, weaving between traffic until the SUV backed off. He ducked into an underground garage and switched vehicles, standard U.S. Marshal evasion tactics. But as he merged onto the freeway, his burner phone buzzed with a text. "You should have stayed quiet." A second later, his rear window shattered. Gunfire from a passing truck. Marcus swerved, metal shrieking, tires screaming against asphalt. He drew his Glock, fired twice through his own windshield, hitting the truck's tire. It spun out, crashed into the median, flames bursting upward. He didn't stop to look. He just drove, breathing hard, blood ringing in his ears. By the time he reached the Federal Annex building, he had one mission left: make the evidence untouchable. Inside, he met with Agent Miller, an old friend from Quantico days. Miller listened without blinking as Marcus laid out everything: Ferris, the sheriff, the senator. "You're playing with fire, brother," Miller said. "Griggs has ties to half the Judiciary Committee. If you leak this wrong, they'll call it fake." "Then we go public together," Marcus said. "You trust me?" Miller stared at him, then nodded slowly. "Always." That night, they uploaded the files to a secure network of journalists and civil rights attorneys, scheduling simultaneous releases in multiple time zones. Marcus knew once the clock hit noon the next day, there'd be no putting the genie back. Around 2 a.m., his apartment door creaked open. He spun with his weapon raised, only to find Nolan, soaked, shaking. "They killed Javier," she whispered. "Car bomb. They thought you'd be with him." The world narrowed to a pulse of fury. Marcus holstered his gun. "Then we finish this now." They moved to Miller's office, the one safe place left. But before dawn, the building's power cut out. Backup generators kicked in, red lights flickering. Miller swore. "They're here." Through the glass wall, they saw shadows moving, tactical gear, silencers. "Not marshals, private contractors." Marcus shoved the drive into Nolan's hand. "If I don't make it, get this to the press." She hesitated. "I'm not leaving you." "You are," he said, tone final. Then he stepped into the hallway, gun steady. The first intruder came from the left. Marcus dropped him with a clean shot to the vest. Two more from the right, flashbangs burst, smoke filling the corridor. He ducked behind a desk, fired twice, heard one go down. Bullets tore through drywall. Papers fluttered like snow. When the smoke cleared, only one man stood, tall, masked, rifle drawn. "Orders are to bring you in alive, Marshal," he said. "Senator wants a conversation." Marcus smirked, eyes hard. "Then tell him to come himself." He fired first. The man fell. Silence returned. Miller and Nolan emerged, shaken but alive. Marcus's shoulder bled again, but he didn't slow down. They reached the parking garage just as black SUVs closed in. "We're out of time," Miller shouted. Marcus spotted a maintenance elevator leading to the street. "Go," he barked. Nolan clutched the drive, sprinting. Marcus and Miller covered her exit with suppressive fire, the air thick with gunpowder and echoing shouts. A bullet grazed Miller's leg. Marcus dragged him behind a pillar. "You good?" "Never better," Miller grunted. "Finish it." Marcus handed him his sidearm and sprinted toward the stairwell, emerging into dawn's gray light. Across the plaza, Nolan jumped into a taxi, clutching the drive. The SUV spotted her and gave chase, but Marcus drew fire away, firing into their windshields until tires screamed and engines smoked. Sirens wailed in the distance, local PD responding. The attackers retreated. By the time the dust cleared, Marcus was gone, officially missing in action. 3 days later, the files detonated across every major network. The Griggs scandal, they called it. Millions watched leaked dashcam footage of DeAndre Lewis's final moments, of Sheriff Dawson ordering falsified reports, of Ferris laughing in a locker room bragging. Ain't no body cam when you turn it off first. Protests ignited nationwide. The senator resigned under medical grounds within hours. Federal oversight committees opened inquiries into law enforcement funding abuse, but still no one knew where Marcus was. Some said he fled the country. Others whispered he was hiding under Marshal protection. Then one night, a grainy video surfaced on an encrypted forum. Marcus standing before the Lincoln Memorial, hooded, voice distorted. "Justice isn't paperwork," he said. "It's accountability. The system's not broken. It's working exactly how it was built. It's time to rebuild it." The video vanished after 12 hours, but its impact rippled through every precinct, every courtroom. Nolan testified before Congress, fearless now, holding up the same flash drive. "He risked everything to show you the truth," she said. "The question is, what will you do with it?" Back in Alabama, the new interim sheriff ordered reforms, mandatory body cams, civilian oversight. But some nights, when the wind howled over Route 28, locals swore they saw a lone black sedan parked by the shoulder, headlights off, engine humming softly, watching. Marcus Tate had become a ghost story told among cops who thought twice before pulling someone over in the dark. Yet for those who knew, he wasn't a ghost at all. He was the reckoning that came when men mistook power for immunity. And somewhere far beyond the city lights, he waited, watching the storm clouds gather again, ready to return when the next lie dared to call itself law. Rain began to fall, thin and relentless, streaking the cracked asphalt where the cruisers still sat, engines humming low like growling beasts that hadn't yet decided whether to retreat or attack. The red and blue lights blinked weakly against the dark sky as Deputy Marshal Andre Carter stood there, badge gleaming under the rain, a quiet storm of composure and power. Every officer around him was silent, their earlier arrogance dissolved into the puddles forming around their boots. The police chief himself, summoned by frantic radio calls, stepped out of his SUV. His face pale when he saw Andre's ID and the insignia that confirmed the nightmare, the man they'd tried to humiliate. The one they'd handcuffed and cursed was a federal officer with jurisdiction that far outranked their own. "Marshal Carter?" the chief stammered. This was a misunderstanding." Andre turned his head slowly, rain sliding down his jaw, his eyes unreadable. "A misunderstanding?" he said quietly. "You had your guns in my face for 20 minutes. You broke my car window. You dragged me out of my own vehicle. You called me every name you could think of before checking who I was." The chief swallowed hard, but Andre didn't wait for his excuse. He handed over a folded document sealed with the Department of Justice emblem. "You'll be receiving official notice in 48 hours, Andre said evenly. "You and every officer who took part in this stop are being investigated under federal oversight. I've already reported this to Internal Affairs, and trust me, they're not the ones you should be worried about. Washington wants a full report. There's going to be change in this department whether you like it or not." He turned to leave, his boots splashing through the puddles. But one of the younger officers, a rookie, his hands shaking, called out, "Sir!" "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Andre paused, glancing back at him, and for the first time that night, something softer flickered behind his eyes. "Then learn," he said quietly. "That badge means you protect, not profile." And with that, he stepped into his car, the engine roaring to life, the wipers pushing aside the rain as he drove away into the night. The police chief stood there motionless, the weight of what had happened settling over him like the storm itself. 2 weeks later, the story exploded across every major news outlet. Body cam footage leaked to the press, grainy, brutal, undeniable. The department claimed it was an isolated incident, but the footage told a different story. the taunts, the slurs, the violence. Public outrage grew until the mayor had no choice but to suspend the entire precinct pending investigation. The same officers who had sneered at Andre now sat in courtrooms, their careers unraveling under oath. Meanwhile, Andre Carter walked the marble halls of the Justice Department in D.C., watching from afar as the system began, however slowly, to correct itself. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it because silence, he'd learned, was complicity. That night on the highway had nearly broken his patience, but it had also reminded him why he wore that badge in the first place. Not for authority, not for pride, but for justice. As the sun broke through the clouds over the Capitol one morning, Andre stood outside the courthouse steps, phone buzzing with a message from a senator's office. They wanted him to lead a new federal task force on police accountability. He looked out across the city, the same faint smile returning to his face. "All right," he murmured, pocketing his phone. "Let's finish what we started." The camera of a nearby reporter caught him walking away, his coat billowing slightly in the wind. The embodiment of quiet strength and unshaken dignity, the man they tried to tear down, now standing taller than ever. And somewhere, beneath the sound of distant sirens and rolling thunder, it almost felt like justice finally answered back.